Go ahead and start. Tell them who you are.
Okay. My name is Harvey Smith. I'm with People's Park Historic District Advocacy Group.
Okay.
And we're here today on the Cal campus. We're going to go up to Pauley Ballroom in a little bit. University is sponsoring sort of a dog and pony show. They're going to have on the podium all the people that support destroying People's Park. And our position is we absolutely need more student housing here in Berkeley. The university has known that for over 50 years, but now they have a dire crisis on their hands, as they phrase it. But they also have alternative locations to build, and that's what we want to see happen. We want to see the university use those alternative locations to build student housing and supportive housing. And it seems like a no-brainer. People's Park was recently put on the National Register of Historic Places. And the chancellor of the university seems to want to ignore that fact. She did a message to the campus at the beginning of the school year, no mention of that fact. So this really goes beyond Berkeley, it goes beyond California. People's Park is a national historic site and should be preserved. So that's one side of the argument to save it. The other side is the environmental value of the park. Any urban planner anywhere probably on the planet would say that in dense urban neighborhoods you need more open space, not less. So here they plan to remove the only open space in a very crowded portion of the city of Berkeley. Right. So for many reasons, People's Park needs to be preserved, and the university needs to go to an alternative site to build their housing.
Right. Can you talk about October 10th, is it, the court date?
There's going to be a court date coming up soon, and we're challenging the university under the California Environmental Quality Act. We have a couple of main issues. One is that they don't have to enroll to the level that they're enrolling. They should catch up with housing before they add more people to Berkeley. It just makes sense. The University of California at Santa Barbara is also being sued by the County of Santa Barbara and the City of Goleta on the same issue. Catch up with housing and then bring in more students. So right. It only makes sense. The other part of our argument is the fact that they do have these alternatives I spoke about. They have proposed sites for building that will total 13,566 beds. Their stated goal, the chancellor and the PR people at Cal have said their goal is 8,000. So that's over a $5,000 differential, 5,000 bed differential. And they can easily forget People's Park and move on to another site, and it wouldn't be an issue. Right. So for those key reasons, we're challenging them. It was in the Superior Court, now it's going to the Appellate Court, and we've submitted our opening arguments. The university will respond, it will respond again, and then the judge will look at it. And that'll happen sometime probably in October, could be November.
Okay. What do you think the Berkeley students' stake in the game is on this? If they look at you and say this doesn't affect me or this is not my business, is that a correct statement for a UC Berkeley student to make?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a correct statement, but there's always been that student. I mean, during the civil rights movement, during the free speech movement, during the anti-war movement, there were always students that, you know, were really not in the game of opposing those things. So, or being involved in activism. So, but the university will claim the students are in favor of building on People's Park. They did a survey. That survey was heavily criticized by the Daily Cal. And I have to take my hat off to the Daily Cal because they have done an excellent job of investigative reporting, and they also have done a number of editorials in support of preserving People's Park.
So we're talking about an actual historical landmark. I think there was debate about whether it was just a landmark, a California landmark, or a national landmark. This is official now.
Yeah, the history is it's been a Berkeley landmark since the 1980s. And so our group, People's Park Historic District Advocacy Group, worked for over a couple of years to put together an application to the National Park Service. That has to go through the State Office of Historic Preservation. It was unanimously approved at that level and then sent off to Washington, where they in turn approved it. So it is on the National Register of Historic Places. It's a National Historic Site.
So would it be fair to say that the UC Berkeley, that UC Berkeley owning this is equivalent to UC Berkeley inheriting or owning a museum? Just because they own it doesn't mean they get to knock it down.
Yeah, you could say that. You know, every, I think, entity, every city, you know, every county, every state values its historic monuments, its historic buildings. So every city, every state, every county, they value their historic legacy. And yeah, you know, there are laws and regulations, but you know, a lot of times private entities and developers, and certainly institutions like university, like the University of California, you know, they have some leeway. So they can either respect that historic building or space or not. And you know, we just urge the university, it's a public institution, it should have a public mission, it should honor the historic legacy of People's Park.
Especially since it's not a private school. It's not like they're, what's a private college? I don't know. It's
Stanford.
Yeah, Stanford's a private college. If this was Stanford, maybe they'd do that, but being that this is a UC.
Well, surprisingly, Stanford actually does a little bit better job with some of its historic preservation than UC Berkeley does.
Wow.
Yeah.
So even more so, is this kind of like a sham, a joke?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's no need to do it. I think it comes down to either an obsession of the chancellor or a sort of a long political battle that goes back to the days of Ronald Reagan when he was governor and then later president. So, you know, we faced a tremendous hit on everything that's public since the days of Ronald Reagan. And I think that a place like Berkeley should be the first to stand up and say no to that legacy. You know, we want to see an expansion of the public sector. It's kind of shocking for me, who was a student at UC Berkeley back in the 60s, when I talk to students today, because when I was a student, it was a truly public education. There was zero tuition. Now students are paying something like over $14,000 a year, plus really expensive housing costs. They're saddled with student debt. And you know, we're going to have a hard time finding the public in public education pretty soon.
Right. Okay, in closing, can you say something about the free speech movement and Mario Savio?
Sure. So, the free speech movement was obviously a high point here on the Cal campus and all over the country. And what happened was that there was a lead up to the free speech movement. It didn't come from nowhere. Most of the major people involved in the free speech movement had been involved in the civil rights movement. So when they went to the South and they did organizing there and voter registration, they came back to Berkeley and they couldn't speak. They didn't have a public forum. And so they took that very seriously. And so they stood up and fought for free speech. That's another good example of the university being very wrong about something that the students valued and stood up for. It's the same thing with People's Park now. So that free speech movement drew in a lot of people, a lot of focus from people obviously all over the state, all over the country, and it sparked movements in other parts of the country. And it was in that milieu of the civil rights movement, activism, and then the activism against the war in Vietnam. So it was important for people to speak out, just as it's important today for people to speak out about issues that we face.
Right. And in closing, can you give Mario Savio so just a brief overview, because a lot of people aren't knowing about him. So
yeah, Mario Savio was a student that did go to the South, did register voters there, was inspired by that, came back to Berkeley, And he was one of many involved in the free speech movement. But something clicked with Mario, and he became an incredible orator, and was a person that kind of the free speech movement kind of formed in a sense around him because of these powerful speeches that he made. Now, of course, he wasn't the only one. He's the one that's most symbolic of the free speech movement. But there were a lot of other people that were very much involved in the free speech movement, and you know, continued on to do all kinds of activism later in life.
Definitely. And then I saw you say something about people giving to your guys' lawyer fund or something like that. How do people give?
Okay. So our organization is trying to support the legal effort, and so we have a website. You can just Google People's Park Historic District Advocacy Group, or just People's Park Historic District. It'll come up, and then we have a page there, Donate Now, and you click on that button, and you can contribute to the legal effort. And we really need support at this point. University has endless funds to spend on this. They have banks of lawyers and PR people, and we're just people in the community that are trying to do the best we can. So if you have the ability to support us, even small amounts, of course larger amounts, please do.
Okay, great. Thank you. And how does someone get in contact with you? What's your email?
Yeah, I'll give you an email. I'll give you a card.
Okay, cool, cool.
What's your